our show, IIT 2020, Impact Video Series, with your host, Sanjiv Goyal. We invite thought leaders and innovators to discuss their approach to the future, especially in post-pandemic world. Today, I have invited an exceptional guest and a dear friend of mine, Dr. Stuart Evans. He's a board member, educator, author, and expert on dynamic high-tech ventures. As a distinguished service professor at CMU, Stuart is director of CMU Emirates iLab, partnership between III and Emirates Airlines for innovation, education, and research. So Stuart, you have witnessed the evolution of internet. Yes, we are both that old. Its transformational impact on us. What do you think about the future of AI?
Oh, well, Sanjiv, thank you very much indeed for inviting me here. It's lovely to see you, and it's great to be able to contribute to such a really awesome event. It really is. And like you said, you and I have seen this, this revolution unfold in ways that we couldn't have imagined 15 years ago. And now we're in the midst of another big disruption and transformation that we're very fortunate to experience. I mean, I think we're at the cusp of the end of the internet age, the beginning of a brand new digital age. Once we get through this current crisis, I think that the innovation that's going to be unleashed with a combination of hardware and software and infrastructure, backbone infrastructure, is going to create a very different society than we've been experiencing. And I think that I count my blessings that, you and I have been fortunate to see the era where, we went from mainframes to minis to PCs to local area networks to servers and all of this kind of technology, which was really focused more on the enterprise than society. And then the internet came along and provide connectivity to everybody. And that, again, was really more of a B2B phenomenon early on. But once the iPhone came out, everybody on the planet almost got connected. And so the way that people are being impacted by the internet now is really coming into sharp focus with COVID. I don't know about you, Sanjiv, but we get our food delivered here. I spend all my time teaching using Zoom. Eric at Zoom has done a fantastic job of being just ready to scale at the right time. I mean, they have 400 million users last time I spoke to them. That's pretty amazing.
And he is one of the keynote speaker too of our summit. So Eric will be talking.
Well, we've been talking to each other for 4 or 5 years now, and I don't know anybody that's more customer focused as an entrepreneur than Eric. And I think we're very fortunate to have his absolutely outstanding engineering expertise coming around just at the right time, certainly for the academic environment, and I think for business too.
So Stuart, let's talk about innovation and the future of innovation. You are an expert of innovation. You really define how the innovation framework should be and how an enterprise or a small business can develop new and unique product. So can you talk a little bit about your process of innovation?
Yes, I call this process now the lighthouse venturing approach because I've seen over the last 4 years a new approach to innovation with large companies, venture capital firms, and startup companies here in the Valley. And I think the rest of the world looks to Silicon Valley really as a role model and how innovation can occur at scale, really, more than anything else. So the ecosystem, we coined the term ecosystem for Silicon Valley a while ago, is spontaneously came together to innovate. And large companies have created corporate venture groups to interact with the startup community here. Every large venture capital firm has a group who work with large corporations to showcase their portfolio companies. And historically, we've seen the POC being an approach to innovation where you test drive first. That approach has got some limitations in terms of how costly it is for large companies to just administer the POCs. And so way things have evolved right now, some of the best ways to innovate I've seen have come out of a company called MoveWorks, which I'm sure you're aware of. Bhavin and the team there have done some really, really astonishing things with AI. And they picked a problem which was a big pain point for many enterprises. And they went out and sourced 6 large companies. Emirates was one of them. We worked with them as lighthouse customers. And the idea was that you find companies that don't compete, but are willing to share their data and share their perspectives amongst all of the companies. And that was mainly with their CIOs and their IT professionals. But I think it set a tone for the way innovation can work effectively, whereby the startup firm is not just coming up with a great idea that it's thrown over the wall. It's actually getting inside the mind of the enterprise to figure out not what the most obvious problems are, but data-driven analysis of what the real problems are. And I think that MoveWorks in particular was able, while they focused initially on the IT service desk, they also, like Zoom, were able to adjust very quickly when COVID came and provided tools for enterprises to onboard people remotely, so you could facilitate working from home, facilitate working from the cloud, facilitate people getting VPNs or laptops and things like that. And I think that lighthouse approach is one now which is starting to become very popular. So I think for a startup, it's half a dozen or so large companies. For an enterprise, it's really important to have a portfolio of innovation. We see my research on flexibility, which Professor Sushil at the IIT in Delhi has worked on for years. It's all about how you make dynamic adjustments to changing conditions. And nothing changes more than innovation, as you're well aware. Droysis has been driving a lot of these innovations for quite some time. So innovation is like a pioneering journey in unexplored territory. You can't anticipate all of the things that happen. And, I teach my students about innovation, and I kid them a little bit in the first class. I say innovation's a fad, and I write FAD on the board, and they look at me kind of curiously thinking, well, if it's a fad, it's a big fad. And so then I say, well, what do you think the FAD is? And so I get them to think about it, and I say, well, innovation's either forced, accidental, or deliberate. And typically it's forced. I mean, we've seen, and yourself, the digital transformation at Emirates. We had a very distinguished gentleman heading up the digital transformation function. We had a huge project with about 200 people working on the next generation. But it's really hard to get the impetus of the entire organization behind something that's not mission critical in the moment. And once the COVID thing hit, the digital transformation that everybody had been working on happened overnight. And so now we're in a very different world.
So absolutely.
Accidental innovation happens a lot too, Sanjiv. You've seen it. We all use Slack, and we know Slack started out life as a video game. It's deliberate innovation is very, very hard. And I think in most cases, necessity is the mother of invention, to use the old adage.
I mean, Silicon Valley is a classic example. If you look at it, all the innovation we see around us, it's mostly you saw some opportunity, but you got some ideas and you start experimenting, and it is, and a lot of time it is failures. Silicon Valley, I find very unique, Stuart. It's so profound that we reward failures in America, especially in Silicon Valley. You and me have seen so many companies fail, but those CEOs, co-founder have no dearth of money for their next idea, next idea, next idea. And that's unfortunately, or that is what required for us to continue to grow and thrive in this society.
Yes, absolutely. And I think the failure rate is extraordinarily high. I mean, something like 4% of all ventures that general partners invest in actually make it. And they're the professional investors, let alone angels and other kinds of investors. And I think that many European visitors to Silicon Valley kind of question, why do you fund 100 companies that only one's going to work? And therein, I think, is part of the secret sauce of Silicon Valley, because to get to that one company from 100, the 100 that start out, some do better than others. And it's a very small community where everything's transparent and people, engineers talk amongst each other and you know what's going on. So you get a sense of who's getting traction. So out of those 100 companies, there's a sort of natural evolution to the 30 or so who are actually starting to get real customers and real revenue. And so there's a gradual sort of concentration of talent in the companies that do very well. And I've noticed over the years that there seems to be like tribes of people who have worked together in the past. I mean, I come out of the storage industry, and I remember there were 12 people that left IBM in Santa Teresa to go found the industry. And out of those 12, there were like 5 companies and then another set of companies. The same is true now, actually, where we're seeing people come out of Google and Facebook creating post-COVID startups. And they're looking to incorporate all of that knowledge that they've experienced of real problem sets. I mean, of real pain points that the enterprise particularly has, and they're able to address them more effectively because of the sheer scale of the work that they've been doing. That's really why machine learning is coming into its own, and graphs and looking at knowledge graphs and seeing how influence diagrams can help decision makers, because the sheer breadth of data and complexity of problems out there is way too much for the human mind to absorb right
process
now.
today.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you've seen in the semiconductor business, you've seen neuromorphic chips start to come out to try and mimic the way humans think. And, they've had limited success up to now, but going forward, they'll improve. That's the way it goes. And, I'm sure it will. And then now I think you're going to see sensors become really, really important. Now we see sensors being mixed with microcontrollers, so you can have much more granularity about what you're working with and shift to a real-time enterprise.
Wow. So Stuart, I always wonder if we both know that technology is completely changed today. Google, Amazon, even Facebook, all the major companies have built literally their platform as a service. So even if I'm a high school kid and I have an idea, I can go and build, I can literally develop a new product or new service. So in that environment, what do you see as the future of innovation, right? Is innovation going to be more coming from the larger organization, or is it going to be more from the small organizations? Or where do you see the next Google is going to come from?
Boy, that's a tough question to answer, Sanjiv, because there are a number of considerations. I mean, I must confess, for the enterprise innovation area, I counsel my students to go work with an entrepreneur that have done it twice or so to learn the game before you do it yourself, because attractive as it seems from the outside, being an entrepreneur, which really is a team, it's not an individual, it's a team of people that do things. Schumpeter pointed that out in the 1930s. It hasn't changed that much. Sure. But the difficulties, the need for resilience and robustness, part of the super flexibility framework that Professor Sushil and I at IIT have been working on, is really about how you stay the course. And I think that the innovation model of Silicon Valley is different to anywhere else, because typically you have to raise funds every 18 months or so. So you naturally have to adapt your strategy to the prevailing conditions. And venture capitalists, are seen as a source of money, but the reality is they're mentors and coaches. Most of the really good venture capitalists are on 7 or 8 boards. They've seen the movie before. And so they're able to act as like Sherpas, if you will, helping the startups get through. And you saw that quite clearly with Snowflake. The Snowflake playbook is a very interesting one. And you see the impact on the public offering market now. So, there's there's a scramble by companies around the world, large companies, and Emirates was pioneering this. So Tim, when we started out the lab at CMU, said, look, we're at the top of our game right now. Now is the time to innovate. And we've done several projects which have come to fruition as a result of the students coming up with an idea based on their research in some cases, and that then got, when we started out working with them in the cargo area, for example, a bunch of students went from Pittsburgh to Dubai to work in the cargo warehouse to understand what the problem was before they went out and built their product. And now they're doing POCs in a couple of the warehouses to get the system automated. So I think that a lot of companies have struggled with the idea of how we innovate going forward. And it's a problem because you have to run a business and then add the innovation on top. And that's typically very hard to do, especially in these difficult times where budgets in some areas are getting cut and then in other areas are expanding. But I have, when in March, the Black Swan letter went out saying, slam the brakes on, stop spending, let's go into a bunker and let this arrive out. And then only to find by May, June, the valley's gone into hypergrowth mode because of the need for digitization and the need for move to the cloud, the need for work from home. And I think it's driving a revolution in the way that we live, work, and I think that's going to come through pretty strongly after we get through this and hopefully have a brave new world for our students and kids to enjoy and grow up in and define a different way to function on the planet.
Stuart, I clearly see this is more like a silver lining for us. Of course, what's happening is really sad, and you and me won't want humanity to go through this. But if we really see this technology was ready even a decade ago, in my opinion,
Yes.
Due to the situation we are in, we are collaborating. So the big thing I will say it is I haven't seen this level of collaboration in my lifetime, where we have governments, we have private citizens, we have enterprises, we have nonprofit. Everybody is collaborating. And what I feel is we are like not only collaborating, we are co-inventing the future together. And that is very interesting in my opinion, because without all stakeholders getting involved, you can't innovate. You and me are fostering innovation for longest time. We are working with largest enterprises. Personally, I have worked with so many large CPG companies, help them really understand how innovation can change their business. And it has. We have some really, really amazing work we have done with, especially in alcohol and food products.
Yes, indeed. I've witnessed some of them, and it is great the way that you operate. You bring alive concepts that are really just thoughts, and that's terrific. And I think, when you look at companies in the retail space, you see such phenomenal innovation in AI. Standard cognition is just going hammer and tongue and changing the way that we shop, and you're involved in that too, I know. So it's an interesting, and you're right about this collaborative nature, and it's always been that way in Silicon Valley. You have the generators of the businesses with VCs and people like that, but you also have the originators of the ideas in universities and think tanks and places like that, and then you have a whole ecosystem of people that can help you go to market, to do trade shows, to do meetings. And then you have a whole legal and personnel infrastructure in place to create the right foundations for a company and also to scale them quickly, because it really is all about people at the end of the day and how you can get people in. And then there's a whole bunch of people that understand how to take companies public and what it takes to do that. So I think the ability for the world to come together now has never been more accessible. We haven't even been able to do it before. And I think what's happening with the work from home is you're finding a tremendous democratization inside the enterprise. Before the CEO and the board would have the the highest office in the building and the fanciest boardroom and things like that, and they'd wear the most expensive clothes. Whereas now, you're sitting on a Zoom call and the CEO's, 10-year-old comes and climbs all over their shoulders. And so I think there's been a sort of a humanizing element to what's been going on that really is quite refreshing.
Stuart, not just that, what I am finding very unique, getting all the stakeholders on the table is far easier now than it used to be. And people are more attentive than they used to, in my opinion, in spite of what popular belief is.
Yes.
Because what is truly happening as a human, we realize that only through collaboration we can build our future. And I'm learning more and more every single day. Every single day is such a phenomenal learning. I can't even tell you. Every single day I feel like, oh, am I getting older or am I getting younger? Because it's so phenomenal what we can do today. And people ask me this question is, Sanjiv, we are outsourcing the job of decision making to computers. What will humans do? And my answer is very simple. We are explorers and we will find new frontiers. We need to solve so many problems we have, including the health for all, including the security, including the food. We have phenomenal challenges in front of the humanity. So problems are not going down, problems are increasing. And we need people like you to really help us doing the innovation and teach the next generation kids. So tell me something exciting you're working on or your kids are working on.
Well, I'd be delighted to do that. I'm a very proud father. Before I do that, though, let me go back to your point about everything being automated. I mean, you know yourself that hyper-automation is really the current big thing going on, and people are trying to take optimized processes a different way. And to a certain extent, people are worried about the consequences of changing, just eliminating jobs as a consequence. But now when you look at the current breed of startups, especially in AI and ML, the name of the game is human in the loop. And there's one term that Bina, I don't know if you know Bina at Deloitte, but Bina uses the term cobots for robots that work in harmony with human beings rather than displacing them. So I think that is a complex issue where obviously there'll be some jobs lost, but there'll be a bunch of other jobs created that will be not menial jobs, but jobs that actually enhance the quality of life for people. But as a proud father, I have to say that our son went through the Y Combinator program this summer, and
Nice.
He did, and he's only 26. This is his third startup though, so it's not like he hasn't done it before. And he's off to the races. He has 20 customers now, and the team is working really hard. And
Congratulations. What is he doing?
Thank you. Well, it's an enterprise software startup. I don't know where he got that idea from.
No, that's so amazing. Well, tree doesn't fall far from the tree. Sorry, fruit doesn't fall far from the tree.
Well, you can imagine my wife and I are so really proud for him. But but in general, the students, I teach this innovation classes and entrepreneurship classes. I develop classes on how you commercialize IP, how you run a board of directors to startups. So around them all are really quite complex. And one of the things that most of the students that I work with are software management students or software engineering students, or in some case design students from our program in Pittsburgh. But I'm part of what we call the Integrated Innovation Unit. What we try and do there is we try to bring together business, engineering, and design and put that into one framework. And most of the students, they're all master's students. They've got maybe 4 or 5 years of experience. I learned so much from them. I feel like the equation is unduly shifted in my benefit because I'm learning so much from the students all the time. And my goal is really to expose them right to the coalface of Silicon Valley. So we've been working with a startup that is still in stealth mode, and the students are looking over the customer persona that they need to get, the size of the market, the product that this company is really running. I tell my students when we start our class, the technology and the product is not the most important thing. I start off with saying, look, 3 U's are what you need to remember for a successful startup. First thing is an urgent customer need, because as you know, that's the only thing that people are going to put their hand in their pockets to pay for. The second thing is a unified team. That is the most important thing, and most professional investors, that's what they invest in, the team. And then the third thing is a unique product or service. And so the 3 U's is really the what I try and leave imprinted in the student's mind when they're starting to think about innovation or startups.
So Stuart, you and me both have spent a majority of our life in Silicon Valley. And when I look at Silicon Valley, what I see it as the biggest secret, or I'll say the reason the companies are so successful here is we reward failures. Do you agree with that?
Well, yes and no, Sanjiv, to be honest with you. I mean, I don't really think anybody sets out to fail. I think what really happens is that people really set out on an exponential learning journey. And it's a little bit like a pioneer in a new land. You may go down a valley that's a dead end. You may learn from that what was going on. But I think there's a tremendous speed of learning here, which is really generated by a sort of experimentation mindset. So just like a scientist, you'll set up a couple hundred experiments to test for a new vaccine or whatever. In fact, the vaccine is a really good illustration of that. The German couple who developed the vaccine for Pfizer, they set up like 20 different experiments with different strains, got it down to 5 and 1. And I think that, failing fast is really an acronym for doing the experiments quickly so you know what works and what doesn't work. And I think that, failing fast and failing forward, which is really Facebook's mantra, was very important in the early years of Facebook because they were creating something very different. I think that when you look at any given area where the technology is really complex, you can't build everything out up front. And so there are things, unknowns that you're not aware of, that you're not able to respond to. But I think the one distinguishing feature of Silicon Valley is that people value the learning and they value resilience, because for an entrepreneurial team to make it through to a public offering requires fortitude of an immense nature. The problems that you get confronted with are just very difficult. And so sometimes you grow too quickly, sometimes you hire the wrong people, sometimes the technology is not quite right. And so naturally you're going to have a high failure rate. And the key thing is you learn what not to do from that failure. And that really then minimizes the space of what you should be doing. And so I think it's a very informative process. And I think most investors would take that view too, that we want to invest in teams that have got scar tissue because they're not going to make those same mistakes again.
Stuart, in addition to that, what I find, there is a very unique element in Silicon Valley is curiosity. What I find is in most of the startup folks, or I'll say majority of them, are very curious. And that is how they find problems which may worth solving. We don't know if it is worth solving or not. And we have funded a lot of those. I personally have funded so many companies which didn't go anywhere. I thought they can do a phenomenal work. But that problem was not even real, or their execution was a challenge. So question for you, being an educator, can you teach curiosity in the classroom? Or is it something you have or you don't?
Well, this is like the question of nature versus nurture, Sanjeev, and whether you can teach entrepreneurship is another similar kind of question. I mean, there is a natural capability that some people possess that's pretty obvious. I think you must have seen it many times. But I think there's also cases where you can trigger that curiosity in people by inspiring them to sort of share the dream that the entrepreneurs and investors have. And I think curiosity, particularly in the enterprise space, is really driven by, in the Valley, we're in a very unique bubble where CIOs of large companies interact very closely with VCs and startup firms. Most CIOs in the Valley will be having at least half a dozen startups every quarter to work with, so they're connected in a different way. But the curiosity really is just the excitement of solving difficult problems. I mean, that in and of itself is just, and to improve humanity. I mean, when Eric set out to do Zoom, he just hated this idea, which you and I have experienced a lot before, of waiting 10 minutes every time before you could get the call going. It was a massive waste of time and inconvenience. And so he saw where the real need was there. I think, though, going back to what you said earlier on about the current environment, the one thing that we have to figure out a new way to do is creativity, because there's nothing like being in a room with a whiteboard and a bunch of people telling you, talking hogwash, and having to kind of backtrack and bring the data in and show them that, well, they're misguided in that view and they should be doing something. And even the slightest gesture, like just the way you underline a concept on the board or something like that, can trigger the creativity. So I think that, one of the areas that we really need to do some work is, what's creativity going to look like in this post-COVID world? Where are we going to find new ideas? I mean, right now, it's very difficult for sales and marketing people to find new customers. It's very difficult to prospect the way that it's been done historically. But product-led growth has taken over, and so, always when one door closes, another one opens, and you have to adjust accordingly. So my research on flexibility was inspired by Silicon Valley because of all these failures and the way that people had to adjust on the fly. If you can't make payroll in 2 weeks' time, it certainly stiffens resolve when you're talking to the customer about when they're going to pay you, and gets things moving. So again, it's this forced adaptation that Silicon Valley has perfected as a methodology. If you don't raise your next fund 18 months from now, you're out of business. You can't make payroll. And so you continually have to make those adjustments to the world that's evolving very quickly. You see that quite clearly in telecommunications area too, where now the expectation is that the infrastructure that we thought we were going to put in place maybe is not going the way we thought it. So as we move to XG as an infrastructure, we'll have low latency and high bandwidth and network splicing and a whole host of new sort of capabilities that require forging into new ways of doing things, and that's I think coming around just around the corner.
So true, Stuart. There are so many phenomenal opportunities we have right in front of us. And every day I get up, I look at everything, I say, wow. I mean, the good example is the God or universe hasn't stopped perfecting our world. Look at the leaf, look at the trees, look at the mountain, look at the rock. He's still perfecting. So we are all in pursuit of perfection. As an entrepreneur, what I find in Silicon Valley, they're continuously looking for ways how they can make things better. Look at even the companies like Google, they haven't stopped innovating. Even Amazon, they haven't stopped innovating. And that is something very unique I find about Silicon Valley, that we are always looking for ways, how do we make things better? Zoom is definitely one of the greatest example, but so is so many other companies. We have 30 plus unicorns in India today. And out of 30, 20 plus are co-founded by IITians, which is great pride for us. half of the Silicon Valley C-level executives are from IIT. So I'm really proud of that. And I truly honored to represent 500,000 of those today in this summit. 500,000 of us are trying to make this world better. We are working, and the problems we are taking are pretty huge problems. And we are looking for more challenges. So the question I have for you is, do you have a challenge for our audience?
Well, let me first step back and say how in awe I am of IITs. I interact with them. Some of the students come from IITs, some of my colleagues come from IITs. And it has, as an educational institution, the pursuit of excellence is nowhere greater than IITs, and it really is a phenomenal academic institution that produces innovators and leaders around the world. I think the best challenge given that is, how is academia going to change now? The comfort of the last 60 or 70 years, we haven't had to change at all, has been taken away. When the inability to meet with students face to face and have interactions, the ability for researchers to collaborate together, the whole notion of what it means for somebody to come to an educational institution, the value of the degree that we generate that gives people the ability to get jobs in different places. I think the challenge that I think we should be wrestling with is how to make our education experience just better for the digital age. Just really, I mean, it's a dream for me to be able to teach a lot of students remotely. I pioneered what I call the global classroom before I knew we're all going to be like this. But in that case, I linked together a classroom here in Silicon Valley at Moffett Field, where we're based, with a classroom in Pittsburgh, with a classroom at our campus in Australia, and the time zones all worked. So we had 30 students in each. And my metric for success was when a student in Australia would be talking to a student in Pittsburgh and Silicon Valley simultaneously, and I would be out of the equation. And it happened a few times. And I think that for the planet, for the world, we need to give some serious thought about innovation in education.
Stuart, I can't thank you enough for joining us and supporting IIT alumni globally. I have learned 3 interesting things from you today. The secret of success. Number 1 is creativity. Second is collaborative learning is a must, and that is what missing today, especially when we talk about in this pandemic world where the kids can go and collaborate with each other, because most of the learning is happening at their level. That's phenomenal. And the last one is, the Silicon Valley is built on failures, so don't be afraid, but fail fast and move on. Word is phenomenal, and we have tremendous opportunities to build next generation of companies. Hi, I'm Sanjiv Goyal, conference chair of IIT2020.org, Pan IIT USA's mega virtual event. Join us to co-invent and co-define paradigms for this new world. Please register IIT2020.org. Our event is open to all. Thank you.
Thank you, Sanjeev. It was a pleasure to be with you today.